Accusations of bullying and harassment are not something typically associated with women's sports, but that's what allegedly took place at Boston University. Women's basketball coach Kelly Greenberg was forced to resign this week after players accused her of emotional abuse. 4 players said it was so bad they quit the team, 2 of them leaving athletic scholarships. A review panel convened by the school could not substantiate many of the complaints, but concluded Greenberg's manner was incompatible with the expectations and standards for university employees. In a statement, Greenberg said she disagreed with the panel's findings, but that, "I do not believe that it will be possible for me to continue as an effective coach at Boston University." So did Kelly Greenberg cross a line, or were the players too sensitive? Shira Springer is a sports reporter for the Boston Globe and a former college athlete. Welcome back, Shira.
Thanks for having me.
So your colleague at the Boston Globe, Bob Holler, documented this pretty well. And like you, I don't know any more about it than what I read there. But did it seem by what he reported that there could have been a line there?
She could have crossed the line. It seemed like she may have. I mean, when you have a player saying that she considered suicide because of, repeated threats or comments by the coach, that seems like she crossed a line. But it's so hard to tell, I think, in some cases where that line is. I mean, you bring up, are female players too sensitive? Do male coaches get away with more than female coaches? I mean, there are a lot of variables there that make it difficult to determine where exactly that line is. But I think when you have student athletes seeking mental health help, a line has been crossed. All
right, let's bring Dan Leibowitz into the discussion. He's head of the Sport in Society program at Northeastern University. Welcome back, Dan.
Thanks.
So, as Shira just said, there's a long history, a storied history, as it were, of coaches on the male side. Bobby Knight, Woody Hayes, this guy Ryan. Is there a double standard there? Is there an expectation that guys are going to, tough it out when that kind of, a lot of it is verbal abuse, it's not physical abuse?
I think that what you're seeing is sort of an evolution of social norms. I think that, earlier last year, Mike Rice at Rutgers was videotaped doing many things that were considered bullying, egregious bullying, very aggressive bullying, and he was fired. And so I think that, errors are different. Errors in sport are different. It's always hard to match player performance against other player performance. I think we're in an era about social justice evolutions where bullying laws and things, they're taken over all over the country. They've taken root everywhere. And so people are sensitive to the issue of bullying. They're sensitive to these issues of ruthless behavior that wouldn't be accepted in other areas. And so things that used to be sort of fiefdoms in sport, the ability to bully people or to do whatever, whether it's on the male side or the female side, I think you're seeing a social evolution in that area. And I think that we're sort of in the midst of figuring out what that looks like, what it means, what positive coaching looks like, and how it affects youth development.
I agree with everything Dan says, but I think there is a double standard with male and female coaches. I think male coaches are given a little bit more of a leeway. I also think that there's a double standard when it comes to wins and losses. I think the more successful a coach, and this goes across eras, the more successful a coach is, the more leeway they get to be what they're called
Bobby Knight.
Exactly, tough but fair. And if you want to go to the women's game, let's look at Gino Auriemma, coach of the incredibly successful UConn women's basketball team. He is known as a tough but fair coach and can be incredibly harsh on some of his players to get out of them what he wants. But because he wins national championships, he is revered for that toughness that he brings to the sideline.
And Kelly Greenberg didn't have that great a record. Going back to Mike Rice for a minute, you gotta wonder, would he have been fired had there not been videotaped evidence? Because as even the BU panel concluded, there's no hard evidence. They could not say with any certainty that some of this stuff transpired. That was undeniable.
I think also, as I said about social norms and the evolution of social norms, I think that we'd be remiss not to say that there's major gender inequity in our country. That's why we have Title IX, and still, there was an article in the paper yesterday about 120 schools in California that aren't compliant with Title IX. So when you start looking at gender inequity across all landscapes, the business landscape and sort of the ceiling of where women are reaching as opposed to where they should be reaching and Hillary Clinton was in town talking about that yesterday. I don't think sport is excluded from that dynamic, where we need to travel a much longer road and a better road and a more socially fair road about the opportunities that we give women and about the latitude we give them, particularly in cases like this.
Do you think some coaches and referees and all that have sort of, women anyway, have modeled themselves after the guys? I mean, did this take place when you were playing sports in college?
First, I do think some female coaches have modeled themselves after male coaches, particularly those male coaches that get results. I mean, when not so much going to the Bobby Knight lengths, but when you see successful male coaches, you want to do what a successful male coach is doing. And if that means perhaps being a little harsher on female athletes, then that's the road they go. When I was younger, I think that male coaches were much easier on female athletes in a lot of cases. I played on a boys team in soccer, indoor soccer, and I noticed a distinct difference between how the male coaches treated the boys on that team and then how my male coaches treated an all-women's team. There was more expectations, there were fewer water breaks. I mean, there was just a higher expectation and I think more demand of discipline. You know, things were the way they set out the practice plan to be, and with the girls, it was a little blurrier.
But I mean, there's a lot of emotional stuff that goes on the women's teams too. I can't speak for the men's teams, but I know it's, you know, sexual confusion and jealousy and all this stuff. I mean, for somebody to say that they were suicidal, I got to say, that to me just seems the extreme. I mean, yeah, you're a college player. Quit, because you're not going to be a professional. I mean, I don't want to be dismissive, but come on.
Well, I think we live in an era where, you know, a lot of what we start to teach, or we'll start looking at what does positive coaching look like? What is so if we embrace sort of the empathy approach of, from that player's eyes out, what was she feeling? What did she get made to feel? How dehumanized was she? I mean, you know, every day in the paper there's a kid that majors in science that might commit suicide, or, you know, there's some sort of pressure on a kid in a college setting because of the developmental mind, because of how that mind's moving forward, that certain things could exacerbate that. And so I think that if we think about it in a classroom setting, and we have to think about it in a coaching setting, I think we're just basically having a national conversation around what positive coaching looks like, how it plays out, and how it's different, say, for the developmental mind in a high school or a college level as opposed to a pro player.
All right, Shira Springer, Dan Leibowitz, thanks so much for coming.